years in the making to get these guys. They're all young. They're 20 years old, 21 years old guys. Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, like are kids, right? And to get them up to speed. Well, to me, and to at least to a certain degree, like that time is gone now. Like you have 4 years of LeBron James under contract, like 4 cracks at winning a title, and we already agree that this year is probably already a punt. So you got to get him up to speed fast, and so this mentorship has to work. I mean, like there's not a lot of room for them to kind of not figure things out, or for Luke Walton to have pressure to win games and be like, well, I'd feel better with Rajon on the court than I would with Lonzo, because 2 years from now, that's not going to do any good. Mm-hmm. And so I think they're going to have these kind of conflicting things, and it'll be really interesting to see how he handles if the choices are Lonzo, particularly if he even feels like he deserves to be out on the court. I think that's when real problems could kind of surface.
Well, agreed. And along those lines, I wonder how much influence LeBron James has on all this, because if they get into fourth quarters and Rondo's on the bench and they don't close in fourth quarters, you heard LeBron gushing over Rondo. LeBron was in Cleveland when Rondo was kicking his ass with the Celtics all those years. He knows the IQ that Rondo has. He knows how well he plays.
He called him one of the smartest players he's ever played.
Everybody calls him that. I mean, it's uncanny how the level of respect that players have for Rajon Rondo. Does LeBron say, look, I want that guy out there on the floor. I want the smart guy. He may not be the more naturally talented anymore, but I want the smart guy out there on the floor. And then what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, there's conflicting interests, right? And that's where LeBron's patience, which was something that kind of came up a couple different times today, is going to be tested this year. I mean, that's, to me, one of the stories I'm most interested in seeing is, like, can LeBron be patient? Because we've seen this guy before when put into these difficult situations, like, it wasn't very patient with their roster last year. Obviously, that team underwent massive changes. There's been stuff like things said on Instagram and like different little hints here in the media and things that he said. Is he going to have that same level of, or a different level, a newfound level of kind of, well, they're young guys, they're going to learn. I mean, today he said the right things about that, but we'll see when they're 5 and 12. You know what I mean? And Lonzo Ball is, shooting 28% from three. If he feels that way still, or if he doesn't like Brandon Ingram shot selection, or doesn't feel like he's tough enough on defense, is he gonna push for Lance Stevenson to be on the court? The guys that he knows. I think, to me, that's what's so interesting about this roster and this team, is that this is a test. I mean, I didn't ask LeBron James a question today. It was a total madhouse over there. It wasn't worth it. But if I was going to ask a question to me, I mean, was that part of the appeal, to test yourself in this totally new way? Which is that surround me with a bunch of 22-year-olds and a bunch of 32-year-olds, and like, let's see if I can make this all work. It's like, because that's something he's never had to do in his career. And I'm really curious to see the results. I think that situation you pointed out with like late in games, who's going to be on the court, particularly at that point guard position. And it might come down to, honestly, I mean, we both know how LeBron plays. It might come down to who's better off the ball in those situations. And I think that's probably going to be an edge to Lonzo. I think at UCLA, he was a little more off the ball than people realized, did a lot more. A lot of his assists came, I think, more in transition and stuff like that. And actually, shot the ball fairly decent in college, I think, off the ball. And he's put in a lot of work on that front this summer, even though he's been hurt. To me, that's where he can make his biggest impact and kind of earn LeBron's trust late in games, will be as a guy who's a secondary player who, once LeBron drives, maybe it's a secondary drive and a pass in the lane, maybe it's a quick swing pass, and the Lakers would hope this, or it's knocking down a big shot when it's presented. I mean, I feel like he can do those things that Rondo does too, but he doesn't see the game the same way, and he certainly at this point doesn't communicate it the same way.
Look, I used the word combustible this summer to describe the Lakers, and I think that little corner of the locker room is the most, because if it is Rondo playing the minutes, maybe Lonzo doesn't say anything, but LeVar might, and we haven't heard much from LeVar over the last few months. I saw Bill Simmons postured that that perhaps he was on the payroll now.
Silence is being bought.
Yes, wouldn't be the first time. I've seen it happen in other sports.
It's a very Hollywood theory. Mm-hmm. Certainly possible. I mean, I think, but Lonzo mentioned this today, and I do think that this is also sort of the I don't want to say the silver lining of getting LeBron James. I mean, that has its own, every color lining. You've got LeBron James. Your life is immeasurably better as a basketball team. But one of the things it does is it takes less attention to Lonzo Ball. Like, that's not a name we've heard a ton about. Mm-hmm. You saw the way the crowds thinned out today. The way everybody was so hanging on every word LeBron James said. There were no seats available. Cameras are shoulder to shoulder. LeBron gets up and walks, half the room walks with him, and now all of a sudden Lonzo Ball can sit down and talk about his jump shot, and there aren't as many people that are listening. And there's a little more. I do think the shadow of LeBron James could really benefit a young player like that who came in with tons of attention, not all of it good, obviously. And I think that's something another thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing this season is what does Lonzo Ball look like when it's not under the guise of like being a big baller or whatever else, when he's not a brand, when he's just like a complimentary piece on a team that's trying to make the playoffs.
All right, let me ask you about Luke Walton because, again, he's a guy that is under a lot of pressure this year, I firmly believe. I thought he did a pretty good job last year, especially navigating some of the turbulence that happened with Lonzo, with LeVar.
And when that stuff happened, they performed well. Like I think that speaks to the way that the team feels about Luke. I mean, when I think not to cut you off, but when I was around the team a little bit after LeVar had said that Luke had lost the locker room or something, I think they went on a pretty decent winning streak and played like some of their best basketball of the year. To me, I think that speaks to the overall respect for him. But yeah, you're right. There is a lot of pressure. I mean, you have LeBron James as your coach. Like, there's going to be pressure. And I think Rob Pelinka, Magic Johnson, late last week did their best to kind of try to say, we know this, and he's our guy. We're backing him. It's but again, if you're 5-12, 17 games in the season, or if you're 10 games under 500 before the All-Star break or at the trade deadline. Do you make a move? I think it's certainly possible. I think, again, you're committed to 4 years of LeBron James. You only have so many chances. You don't want to go down the roads with people that, if it's not going to work. I tend to think he's a good coach. I think he did a really good job with that team last year, got that team playing defense, which if you'd seen them before was not a strength necessarily of that team. I think he obviously helped develop Julius Randle and push the right buttons with him over the course of the season. They did a really good job with Kyle Kuzma, and I think Brandon Ingram got better as the year went along. And to me, the one guy that we never talk about when we talk about the Lakers, and maybe, this is favored is a weird word, but the guy that I think could impact a good team the most is Josh Hart, a guy that I think is a versatile, super important modern NBA wing who can kind of do a little bit of everything. They did a really good job with those guys, I think, last year, and have developed them enough to put them in a position where you can put them next to LeBron James and feel that they've got a credible shot at the playoffs. I know maybe you don't feel that way, but I think they've got enough of those young pieces to whether it's ship them off in a trade and bring in that other superstar if things go badly, or I think Luke has put together a good enough base, but that's the huge elephant in the room is like, you don't have a lot of time. 4 years isn't that long.
Look, of course they have a credible shot at the playoffs. It's just, I think, given the West and how many wins it's going to take to get there, I think it's asking a lot, even with LeBron James on your team, to get to that threshold, since it's just as strong, if not stronger, than what it was last year. My question with Luke, though, is, what does he have to do? Winning cures all. If they're the fourth seed in the Western Conference, he keeps his job. But if they miss the playoffs, I go back to the same stuff. Magic didn't hire him. Pelinka didn't hire him. Mm-hmm. And what we know about LeBron James, he absolutely tried to push Eric Spoelstra out in Miami his first year. David Blatt, after winning the Eastern Conference and having a well above 500 record in that second year, was pushed out in part because LeBron wanted somebody else on that job. It's almost an impossible situation for Luke Walton to be in. He looked like he was giddy about it today. I wonder what he looks like 2 months from now when we're around Christmas time.
Well, I think this is it speaks to a lot of these guys, is it changes everybody's timeline, right? That Luke Walton is still a young coach in this league, a guy who's getting better. Had the really weird situation at the start of his kind of head coaching career in Golden State where he was gifted this amazing roster. And did a tremendous job. I'm not a person who thinks that anybody could just that a paper bag could have coached the Warriors that season. No, I think you need to manage those egos, and I think he did a good job of that. And there has to be a figurehead, right? But I think his timeline in terms of growing as a coach has been elevated. I think Lonzo Ball's timeline is, in terms of learning how to be a credible shooter, it's shrunk. It's got to get there faster. Same with Brandon Ingram getting stronger, and all of these things have to move quicker now. And you're right, there's immense pressure on him because he's much more replaceable than Lonzo Ball or Brandon Ingram or Kyle Kuzma. that's one of those things that it's kind of the first thing to go. And I think you're right. Like, they've said that he has, their full support. I know Jeannie Buss thinks very highly of him. I think they appreciate the job that he's done in his time so far with the Lakers. He's family here. Obviously has been someone who is a part of their community, a part of their fabric, and they like that. But how much is that going to matter if LeBron doesn't? And I think, you asked, what does he have to do? I think he has to, it's an unenviable job. He has to keep LeBron patient. And knowing that all of these things are moving quickly and stuff like that, keep him kind of focused on that long view that he talked about today. If they're not in position, to kind of make a run right now, we'll see. They were a team that snuck up on teams, I think, at times last year. They played harder than people thought. They were in a lot of games and didn't close at the end. It's easy to say, well, we got LeBron James now; those problems will be solved. I think there will be a little bit of a different attacking mindset from teams that come through Staples Center, or when the Lakers come to town. But there's a lot of pressure on him for sure. It wouldn't stun me if he's not the coach next year. It wouldn't stun me if they get off to a bad start and he's scapegoated this year. I don't think it's necessarily fair either way. But when you get LeBron James, he called it a tremendous opportunity today, and it is. It's a chance. You have the best player in the world. You know what I mean? That's a huge chance as a head coach. It also comes, though, with giant stakes, right? And there's less room for error.
Support for the Yahoo Sports NBA podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans, America's premier home purchase lender. Let's talk about buying a home. It can be one of the most important purchases that you'll ever make. But today's fluctuating interest rates can leave you with unexpected higher payments, which can turn a great experience into an anxious one. That's why Quicken Loans created their power buying process. Here's how it works. They check your income, assets, and credit to give you a verified approval. This gives you the strength of a cash buyer, making your offer more attractive to sellers. Once verified, you qualify for their exclusive Rate Shield approval. They'll lock your interest rate up for 90 days while you shop for your new home. Then, once you found the one, if rates have gone up, your rate stays the same. But if rates have gone down, you get to keep that new lower rate. Either way, you win. It's the kind of thinking you'd expect from America's largest mortgage lender. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mannix. That's rocketmortgage.com/Mannix. Rate Shield approval only valid on certain 30-year purchase transactions. Additional conditions or exclusions may apply based on Quicken Loans data in comparison to public data records. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030.
All right, let's move over to Jimmy Butler, who was not at the Timberwolves media day.
I was hoping he'd just show up somewhere today, right?
And do something, some kind of media anywhere, who knows, or, but whatever. Jimmy Butler, 29 years old, one of the better two-way guards in the league, has a year left on his contract. He wants out of Minnesota. I've heard different things about why. It sure seems like the Andrew Wiggins relationship sucked. That was... You saw the Wiggins family kind of getting involved on social media about that. Butler has a list of 3 teams. It's the Clippers, it's the Knicks, and the Nets. From what I'm told, the Wolves aren't even looking at that list. Like, you want Jimmy Butler, make us an offer. We'll deal you. They have no allegiance or desire to appease Jimmy Butler, and there have been other teams coming in making significant offers to go and get him. What do you make of that whole situation, which seems like it has pitted Tom Thibodeau, the coach and the president, against Glenn Taylor, the owner? Tibbs seems like he's in favor of riding this thing out, trying to make it work, at the very least trying to win this year with Jimmy Butler, and perhaps dare him to leave money on the table next summer, whereas Glenn Taylor doesn't seem like he has the appetite to go through a turbulent season like this.
Well, I think, again, this is another example you can follow this under, probably why having a head coach be in charge of your long-term basketball decisions is probably not a great idea, because you said it right there. Their best chance to win this season, their best chance to make the playoffs this season, is if Jimmy Butler is on the court. Like, he's good enough to get them into the playoffs, right? Or at least keep them in the conversation. If he's not on the team, depending on what the return is, we keep looking for teams to fall out of the West, out of the top 8, as, teams like Denver's coming, the Lakers are the obvious one. Like, who's going to be in the playoff race that wasn't in it last year? The Clippers maybe sneaking up on people with a deep roster. Minnesota's a candidate to not be in the playoffs next year, right? And if he's going to leave anyways, you know what I mean? I tend to side with ownership in these situations. Like, if a guy's going to leave, and if he's going to leave, trying to max. Now, you would ideally, this wouldn't be a public auction. You know, that